The day Arlette's world shattered, she had rushed home with joyful tears and the most precious news any woman could share. Instead of finding celebration, she found betrayal. Raphael's cruel words cut deeper than any knife. "You barren, worthless woman. I've already married someone who can give me what you never could. Get out of my house." He never saw the positive pregnancy test that fell from her trembling hands as she fled into the rainy night. Welcome to Mr. Peter Stories, where every tale inspires and captivates. Dive into a world of wisdom, adventure, and imagination. Don't miss out. Subscribe now and join the journey. Chapter 1. Love's First Bloom. The evening sun painted Miami's skyline in hues of gold and coral, its warm rays dancing across the pristine gardens of the Fisher Island Charity Gala. Arlette Flower stood amidst a sea of roses, her nimble fingers arranging the last centerpiece with the precision of an artist. At 28, she had already made a name for herself in Miami's elite social circle as the most sought-after floral designer, though her path hadn't been easy in a world that often judged by color before talent. The warm breeze carried the intoxicating blend of sea salt and jasmine across the outdoor venue, making the crystal chandeliers tinkle softly above the tables she had transformed into gardens of wonder. Each arrangement told a story: whites and creams for innocence, deep burgundies for passion, and touches of blue delphiniums that matched the endless Florida sky. "I've never seen flowers tell such stories before," a deep voice remarked behind her, causing her to start. "They speak of dreams and possibilities." Arlette turned, her heart skipping a beat as she found herself looking into the most striking green eyes she'd ever seen. Raphael Kendrick stood before her, Miami's most eligible bachelor and the evening's host, looking more handsome in person than any magazine cover had captured. His dark hair was swept back from a face that spoke of both privilege and determination, his Tom Ford suit fitting him like a second skin. "Mr. Kendrick," she managed, willing her voice to remain steady, "I hope the arrangements meet your expectations." "Please, call me Raphael," he smiled, and something in that smile made the world shift slightly on its axis. "And they've exceeded every expectation, much like their creator." A blush crept across her cheeks as she watched him pluck a single white rose from a nearby arrangement. "You know," he continued, twirling the flower between his fingers, "in Victorian times, each flower had a meaning, a secret language of love and longing." "The language of flowers," Arlette nodded, her passion overcoming her nervousness. "Floriography. A white rose can mean new beginnings or eternal love, depending on how it's presented." "And how would you interpret this one?" He stepped closer, extending the rose to her. The setting sun cast golden highlights in his hair, and that smile, that devastating smile, never left his face. "That would depend on the intention of the giver," she replied softly, accepting the flower. Their fingers brushed, sending electricity through her veins. That moment marked the beginning of a courtship that would set Miami's social scene ablaze with gossip and speculation. Raphael Kendrick, whose tech empire had made him a millionaire by 30, pursued Arlette with an intensity that took her breath away. He sent daily flower arrangements to her small design studio in Brickell. Never roses, always surprising her with exotic blooms that spoke of adventure and passion. Their first date was a midnight yacht cruise around Biscayne Bay, the Miami skyline twinkling like earthbound stars. Arlette wore a cream silk dress that floated around her in the warm breeze, and Raphael couldn't take his eyes off her. "You know what makes flowers truly beautiful?" she asked him that night, leaning against the yacht's railing. "It's not just their colors or their shapes. It's their impermanence. They remind us to appreciate beauty while it lasts." Raphael took her hand, his thumb tracing patterns on her palm. "Some beauty is meant to last forever," he said, pulling her closer. Their first kiss tasted of champagne and possibilities, the Miami night wrapping around them like a velvet cloak. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and Arlette found herself falling deeply in love with not just Raphael, but the world he opened up to her. He took her to art galleries in Wynwood, where street art told stories of dreams and rebellion. They had impromptu picnics in South Point Park, watching cruise ships depart as they shared secrets and dreams. He introduced her to his world of tech and innovation, and she showed him how to find beauty in life's smallest moments. The whispers followed them, of course. Miami's old money couldn't quite accept that Raphael had chosen a black woman from a modest background, no matter how successful her business had become. But Raphael silenced every criticism with unwavering devotion. At every social event, he proudly introduced her as the woman who had taught him the meaning of true beauty. 6 months after their first meeting, on a perfect Miami evening much like the one where they met, Raphael proposed in her flower shop. He had filled the space with thousands of white orchids, her favorite flower, representing luxury and strength. As she stood among the blooms, he knelt before her with a ring that held a pink diamond as rare as their love. "Arlette Flower," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "you've shown me that life's most precious moments aren't in boardrooms or bank accounts, but in the simple beauty of a flower opening its petals to the sun. You've opened my heart the same way. Will you marry me?" Tears streamed down her face as she nodded, unable to speak. As he slipped the ring onto her finger, the setting sun streamed through the shop's windows, setting the diamond ablaze with light. They kissed among the orchids, their love as pure and promising as the first blooms of spring. Their wedding 3 months later was the talk of Miami. They chose the Vizcaya Museum and Gardens, its Renaissance-inspired architecture and lush gardens, providing a backdrop as timeless as their love story. Arlette designed all the florals herself, transforming the already beautiful space into an ethereal garden. She walked down the aisle in a Vera Wang gown, carrying a bouquet of white orchids and stephanotis, while Raphael waited for her under an arch of white roses and jasmine. As they exchanged vows beneath the Miami sky, their words carried across the garden like a promise. "You are my beginning and my forever," Raphael vowed, his green eyes shining with tears. "In you, I found not just love, but home." Their reception lasted well into the night, the gardens illuminated by thousands of twinkling lights that reflected off the surface of the pools like fallen stars. They danced their first dance to "At Last" by Etta James, and as Raphael held her close, he whispered, "Every moment led me to you." After a honeymoon that took them through the romantic cities of Europe, they settled into their new life together in a Spanish colonial mansion in Coral Gables. Arlette turned the sprawling gardens into her own paradise, filling them with flowers from around the world. Every morning, they would share coffee on their terrace, planning their future while watching the sun rise over their own piece of paradise. Those first years were filled with a love so pure and profound, it seemed to touch everything around them. Raphael's business flourished under the influence of her creativity, and her floral design company expanded to become the most prestigious in South Florida. They hosted dinner parties where tech moguls mixed with artists, creating a salon of ideas and innovation. Their home became known as a place where love and beauty reigned supreme. In quiet moments, they would often return to Fisher Island, to the spot where they first met. Standing there, watching the Miami sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors, they would hold each other close and marvel at how a chance meeting among flowers had bloomed into a love story for the ages. "Do you remember what you said about flowers being impermanent?" Raphael asked her on their first anniversary as they stood in that very spot. "You were wrong about one thing. Our love is like a garden. It may change with the seasons, but it will always bloom." Little did they know that their garden of love would face storms that could uproot even the strongest flowers. But in that moment, under the Miami sky that had witnessed their beginning, they were simply two souls who had found their perfect match, their love as endless as the horizon where the sky met the sea. Chapter 2. Paradise Lost. The Miami summer had never felt so stifling. Arlette stood in their master bathroom, staring at yet another negative pregnancy test, the third this month. Outside, palm trees swayed in the humid breeze, their shadows dancing across the marble floors of their Coral Gables mansion. 2 years into their marriage, the pressure to conceive had become a constant companion, heavier than the Florida heat. She dropped the test into the wastebasket, where it landed among its predecessors like fallen hopes. Through the open window, she could hear their neighbors' children splashing in a pool, their laughter a bittersweet reminder of what she desperately wanted. Arlette pressed her forehead against the cool mirror, remembering simpler times when their love felt enough. The first signs of trouble had appeared subtly, like storm clouds gathering on a clear Miami day. It started with the questions at social events, first gentle inquiries about their family plans, then increasingly pointed remarks about Arlette's age and the importance of securing the Kendrick legacy. Raphael's mother, Constance, had become particularly relentless. "Darling," Constance would say during their weekly family dinners at the exclusive Lagorda restaurant in Coral Gables, her voice dripping with false concern. "I know this lovely fertility specialist on Brickell Avenue. Perhaps it's time to consider some professional help." Her words would hang in the air like the heavy Miami humidity, impossible to ignore. Initially, Raphael had defended them both. "Children will come when they come, mother," he'd say, squeezing Arlette's hand under the table. But as months turned into years, his reassuring squeezes became less frequent, his silence more pronounced. Their third wedding anniversary arrived with a Category 4 hurricane bearing down on the Florida coast. They spent it boarding up windows and securing their garden, which had become Arlette's sanctuary. As they worked, she noticed how Raphael's eyes lingered on the empty playground equipment they'd optimistically installed the previous year. That night, as the storm raged outside, they lay in bed listening to the wind howl. "Maybe we should see that specialist," Arlette whispered into the darkness. The words cost her more than she wanted to admit. Raphael pulled her close, but she felt the tension in his body, the weight of unspoken expectations. The next 2 years became a blur of doctor's appointments, hormone treatments, and scheduled intimacy. Their once passionate love life transformed into a clinical exercise in timing and temperature tracking. Arlette's formerly successful floral business began to suffer as she poured all her energy into their pursuit of parenthood. Their home, once filled with laughter and spontaneous dinner parties, grew quieter. The garden, which had been her pride and joy, showed signs of neglect. Even the vibrant bougainvillea that had once cascaded over their terrace began to wither in the relentless Miami sun. Raphael threw himself into his work, expanding his tech empire across South America. His business trips grew longer, his late-night office hours more frequent. When he was home, the silence between them stretched like the endless horizon over Biscayne Bay. The breaking point came during a charity gala at the Vizcaya Museum, the very place they'd exchanged their vows. Arlette overheard 2 women whispering behind their champagne flutes. "Poor Raphael," one said, her voice carrying across the marble terrace. "He should have chosen someone more suitable. These mixed marriages rarely work out anyway." "Well, darling, you can't expect good breeding from—" The woman's words cut off as she noticed Arlette standing there, but the damage was done. That night, after they returned home, Arlette found Raphael in his study, nursing a glass of scotch. "Do you regret marrying me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He didn't answer immediately, and in that pause she heard everything she feared. "I love you," he finally said, but the words sounded hollow, like an echo of something once true. The treatments became more aggressive, more expensive, more demanding. Arlette's body betrayed her with each failure, while her heart cracked under the weight of disappointment. She began to avoid mirrors, unable to face the shadows under her eyes, the strain showing on her once radiant face. Their 5th anniversary passed without celebration. Raphael was in São Paulo for a business meeting, and Arlette spent the evening alone in their garden, surrounded by the flowers that had once brought them together. She sat there until the Miami night enveloped her, fireflies dancing around her like the dreams that seemed to be slipping away. When Raphael returned, he brought expensive gifts and hollow apologies, but the distance between them had grown wider than the ocean he'd crossed to come home. Their conversations became superficial, focused on schedules and social obligations rather than the deep connections they'd once shared. The whispers in Miami's social circles grew louder. Arlette noticed how other women looked at Raphael with barely concealed interest at every event they attended. She saw how his mother had begun introducing him to old family friends who just happened to have eligible daughters. Their 6th year of marriage brought more specialists, more treatments, more disappointments. The doctors spoke of options, surrogacy, adoption, but Arlette could see the growing frustration in Raphael's eyes. He wanted his own child, his own blood, his own legacy. The garden that had once been their sanctuary became Arlette's refuge of solitude. She would spend hours there, talking to her flowers, sharing the tears she couldn't let Raphael see. The orchids still bloomed, oblivious to her pain, their beauty a reminder of happier times. On their 7th anniversary, Raphael didn't come home at all. His text message cited an emergency board meeting, but his Instagram betrayed him. He was at a club in South Beach, surrounded by beautiful young women who looked nothing like Arlette. That night, as she sat alone in their vast mansion, Arlette realized that their love story had begun to wilt like untended flowers. The passion that had once burned brighter than the Miami sun had dimmed to a flicker, threatened by the storms of expectation and disappointment. Yet still she held on, going through the motions of their life together. She hosted their dinner parties with a painted-on smile, attended charity galas on Raphael's arm, and continued to hope that each month would bring the miracle they desperately sought. As their 10th anniversary approached, Arlette noticed changes in Raphael. His late nights became more frequent, his excuses more elaborate. The tender touches and loving glances that had once been constant were now rare as summer snow in Miami. She found receipts for jewelry she never received, caught whiffs of unfamiliar perfume on his suits, noticed lipstick stains he'd failed to spot. Each discovery was a thorn in her heart, but she buried her suspicions beneath forced smiles and quiet dignity. Their love story, which had begun with such promise among the flowers of Fisher Island, was wilting under the harsh reality of unfulfilled expectations and unspoken resentments. The question was no longer if their garden of love would survive, but how long they could pretend it wasn't already dying. Little did Arlette know that fate had a twist in store, one that would either resurrect their withering love or finally tear it apart at the roots. As she prepared for their 10th anniversary, a secret was growing inside her, like a seed taking root in the most unexpected season of their lives. Chapter 3. The Silent Storm. The morning Miami sun filtered through the blinds of Dr. Sarah Martinez's office on Brickell Avenue, casting stripes of light across Arlette's trembling hands. 10 years of heartbreak and desperate hoping had led to this moment, this small examination room with its stark white walls and 2 bright fluorescent lights. "Mrs. Kendrick," Dr. Martinez said, her warm brown eyes crinkling with genuine joy. "Congratulations, you're pregnant." The words hung in the air like music. Arlette pressed her hand to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. After thousands of negative tests, hundreds of appointments and countless prayers, life had finally blossomed within her. "I recommend keeping this news quiet for the first trimester, Doctor," Martinez continued, squeezing Arlette's hand. "Given your history, we'll want to monitor you closely. But Arlette," she smiled, "this is real. You're going to be a mother." Stepping out into the Miami heat, Arlette felt as though she was floating. The city seemed different somehow, brighter, more vibrant. A street vendor's roses appeared more red, the sky more blue, the world more alive with possibility. She found herself touching her still flat stomach, knowing that beneath her silk blouse a miracle was growing. She decided to keep the news to herself for now, harboring it like a precious secret. After years of sharing every medical detail with Raphael, of watching his hope turn to disappointment month after month, she wanted to wait until she was certain. She wanted their joy to be unmarred by anxiety this time. At home, Arlette walked through their garden, whispering to her flowers about the life growing inside her. The orchids seemed to bend toward her as if listening, their delicate petals nodding in the breeze. She imagined bringing their child here, teaching them the names of flowers, watching them toddle through paths lined with blooming hibiscus. But while Arlette's heart swelled with secret joy, she couldn't ignore the growing distance between her and Raphael. His absences had become more frequent, his excuses more elaborate. When he was home, he moved through their house like a ghost, present but somehow not there at all. One evening, as summer storms rolled in from the Atlantic, Arlette overheard him on the phone in his study. His voice was low, intimate in a way it hadn't been with her in years. "I'll handle everything," he was saying. "Just be patient." When she asked him about the call over dinner, he dismissed it as business, but wouldn't meet her eyes. She threw herself into planning the perfect way to tell him about the baby. She ordered custom-made baby shoes, had them wrapped in the same cream-colored paper they'd used for their wedding invitations. She arranged for his favorite restaurant to prepare a special dinner, complete with the chocolate soufflé he loved. Meanwhile, Raphael grew more distracted, more distant. His mother's weekly dinner invitations suddenly stopped, and their usual social circle seemed to be avoiding her. Text messages went unanswered, calls went to voicemail. Something was shifting in their world, like the ground before an earthquake. The signs were there, if she'd allowed herself to see them. The mysterious charges on their shared credit card. The late-night meetings that couldn't be verified. The way his secretary stammered when Arlette called the office. But she was so wrapped up in her precious secret, so focused on protecting the fragile life within her, that she pushed aside her growing unease. 4 weeks after her doctor's appointment, Arlette woke to find Raphael's side of the bed empty again. His suits were missing from the closet, his favorite watch gone from the dresser. On his pillow lay a business card for a divorce attorney. Her heart refused to accept what her mind already knew. She called his office, only to have his secretary burst into tears. "Mrs. Kendrick," the young woman sobbed, "I'm so sorry. I wanted to tell you, but he made us all sign NDAs." Arlette sat in their garden, surrounded by the flowers that had witnessed the beginning of their love story, and felt her world begin to crack. The baby fluttered within her, a tiny reminder that regardless of what was happening, she wasn't alone. That evening, she heard cars pulling up to their house. Voices drifted up from the driveway, Raphael's, his mother's, and another woman's she didn't recognize. Taking a deep breath, she gathered her strength and went downstairs to face whatever storm was coming. She never got to tell him about their miracle, never got to see his face light up with joy, never got to share the moment she'd dreamed of for 10 years. Instead, she found herself standing in their foyer, the tiny wrapped baby shoes clutched behind her back, as her husband shattered their world with cruel words and colder eyes. The woman standing beside him was everything Miami's social circle had wanted for Raphael, young, blonde, from an old money family. The diamond on her left hand caught the light, mocking Arlette with its brilliance. "I've given you 10 years, Raphael said, his voice devoid of the love that had once made her believe in fairy tales. 10 years of disappointment and failure. Victoria can give me what you never could. A family, a legacy, a future." The tiny shoes fell from Arlette's numb fingers, landing silently on the marble floor. Outside, thunder rolled across the Miami sky, and the heavens opened up as if weeping for her. She looked at the man she'd loved for a decade, the father of the child he didn't know existed, and saw a stranger. Victoria's smirk, Constance's triumphant gaze, Raphael's cold dismissal, they all blurred together as Arlette's world collapsed. Without a word, she turned and walked out into the rain, leaving behind everything but her dignity and the precious secret she now knew she would carry alone. The storm matched her tears as she drove through Miami's streets, past the places that held the memories of their love, the Fisher Island Gardens where they met, the Vizcaya Museum where they wed, the beaches where they dreamed of their future. Each landmark was a testament to a love story that had just become a tragedy. But as she drove, one hand on the wheel and the other pressed against her stomach, Arlette felt something else growing alongside her grief: determination. She would rise from these ashes. She would build a new life, not just for herself, but for the child who would never know their father's betrayal. The rain continued to fall as she crossed the causeway, leaving behind the glittering Miami skyline and the shattered remains of her fairy tale. She didn't know where she was going, but she knew one thing with certainty: this wasn't the end of her story. It was just the beginning of a different one. Chapter 4. Through the Storm. The midnight train to New Orleans rumbled through the Florida darkness, its gentle sway doing little to calm Arlette's shattered nerves. Rain pelted against the window, matching the tears that refused to stop falling. Her phone buzzed incessantly in her purse, calls from friends, from clients, from her employees, but she couldn't bear to answer any of them. Not yet. Not when every word of explanation would make Raphael's betrayal more real. She'd driven for hours through the storm before finding herself at Miami Central Station, soaked to the bone and running on autopilot. The station attendant had taken one look at her tear-stained face and upgraded her ticket to a private sleeper car without charging the difference. "Sometimes," the elderly woman had said kindly, "we all need a little grace." Now, as palatial Miami mansions gave way to Florida wilderness, Arlette pressed her forehead against the cool glass and tried to make sense of how her life had imploded so spectacularly. Just that morning, she'd been planning how to tell Raphael about their miracle. Now, she was fleeing the only home she'd known for the past decade, carrying nothing but her purse, her dignity, and their unborn child. The baby. Her hand drifted to her still flat stomach, finding strength in the secret life growing within. In the midst of devastation, this tiny spark of hope remained. She wouldn't let Raphael's cruelty taint this miracle. This child would know love, not betrayal, joy, not abandonment. Her grandmother Rose's face appeared in her mind, strong, loving, wise beyond her years. Grandma Rose, who'd raised 3 children alone after losing her husband in Vietnam, who'd built a successful restaurant in the French Quarter through sheer determination. If anyone could help Arlette rebuild from ashes, it would be her. The train crossed into Alabama as dawn broke, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Arlette finally checked her phone, scrolling through dozens of missed calls and messages. One text from her assistant, Maria, caught her eye. "They're already moving her in. I'm so sorry, Arlette. Whatever you need, I'm here." Moving her in. Victoria, the woman who'd stood in Arlette's foyer, wearing a triumphant smile and a fresh engagement ring, while Raphael announced he'd already married her. The memory brought fresh tears, but also a surge of anger. 10 years of love, of building a life together, erased in a moment of cruel calculation. She forced herself to read more messages. Apparently, Miami's social circles were ablaze with gossip. Some claimed she'd been unfaithful. Others whispered that she'd embezzled from Raphael's company. The truth, that Raphael had betrayed her in the most calculated way possible, seemed too simple for their soap opera appetites. One message made her breath catch. "Mrs. Kendrick, this is James Rothschild from First Miami Bank. Mr. Kendrick has requested immediate freezing of your joint accounts. Please contact me urgently to discuss your options." Of course, he'd planned everything meticulously. The new wife, the frozen accounts, the carefully crafted narrative that would paint him as the wronged party. The perfect execution suggested weeks, maybe months of preparation. While she'd been dreaming of their future family, he'd been orchestrating her removal from his life. The train attendant brought breakfast, coffee she couldn't drink because of the pregnancy, and toast her churning stomach couldn't handle. She managed a few bites of dry bread, knowing she needed to keep her strength up for the baby. Her phone buzzed again. Raphael's mother. Constance. The voicemail was everything she expected. "Darling, I know you're upset, but surely you understand. Raphael needs an heir, a proper family. We gave you 10 years to prove yourself worthy of the Kendrick name. Time to bow out gracefully." Worthy of the Kendrick name. Arlette's hand clenched around her phone. She'd given them everything. Her youth, her dreams, her trust. She'd endured their subtle racism, their constant criticism, their disdain for her common background. And all along, they'd been waiting for an excuse to discard her. As Alabama gave way to Mississippi, Arlette forced herself to think practically. She had some savings in a private account, not much, but enough to start over. Her floral design business was in her name alone. Raphael had insisted on that, probably planning for this very moment. Her reputation in the industry was solid. She could rebuild. The baby shifted within her, a flutter so slight she might have imagined it, a sign of life, of hope, of future possibilities. She wouldn't let this child grow up feeling unwanted or unworthy. This baby would know their mother's strength, not their father's cruelty. By the time the train reached the outskirts of New Orleans, Arlette had cried her last tears for Raphael Kendrick. The woman who stepped onto the platform at Union Passenger Terminal was different from the one who'd fled Miami. Her heart was broken, yes, but her spine was steel. The familiar sounds and smells of New Orleans wrapped around her like a comforting embrace. Jazz music drifted through the humid air, mixed with the scent of chicory coffee and beignets. This city had been her first home. Long before Miami's glitter had caught her eye, it would be her sanctuary now. Grandma Rose was waiting at the terminal, her small frame radiating strength and love. One look at Arlette's face told her everything she needed to know. Without a word, she opened her arms, and Arlette fell into them, finally feeling safe. "Come home, baby," Rose whispered, her voice warm and sure. "We'll figure it all out together." As they drove through the French Quarter to Rose's Garden District home, Arlette watched the historic buildings pass by. Each weathered facade told a story of survival through storms, through wars, through heartbreak and rebirth. Like New Orleans itself, she would rise again, stronger for having weathered the storm. That evening, sitting on her grandmother's wraparound porch with a glass of ginger ale, Arlette finally found the words to share her secret. Rose's eyes filled with tears of joy as she placed her hand on Arlette's stomach. "That man's a fool," Rose declared, her voice fierce with protective love. "But this baby is a blessing, and we're going to give them the most beautiful life imaginable." As the sun set over New Orleans, painting the sky in colors no Miami sunset could match, Arlette felt the first stirrings of peace. Tomorrow would bring challenges, legal battles, financial struggles, the gossip and speculation of Miami's elite, but tonight, in this city of rebirth and resilience, she could finally breathe. She was Arlette Flower again, no longer Mrs. Kendrick, and somehow that felt like freedom. Chapter 5. Rising from Ashes. The French Quarter morning bloomed with possibility as Arlette arranged flowers in the window of Fleur de Vie, her new floral boutique on Royal Street. 6 months had passed since that rainy night in Miami, and her life had transformed in ways she never imagined. Her baby bump, now proudly visible, caught the early sunlight as she worked, reminding her that sometimes life's greatest gifts come disguised as losses. The shop's location was a stroke of luck, or as Grandma Rose called it, divine timing. The previous tenant, a longtime friend of Rose's, had been looking to retire just as Arlette needed a fresh start. The space, with its exposed brick walls and original French doors, seemed designed for her vision of a luxury floral boutique that would rival anything in Miami. "You've got that glow about you this morning," called Marcel, the owner of the antique shop next door. He'd taken to bringing her beignets every morning, claiming her baby needed authentic New Orleans sweetness. "Those society ladies from the Garden District won't know what hit them when they see today's arrangements." Arlette smiled, adjusting a spray of orchids, her signature flower, despite the memories they carried. She'd learned to separate the beauty of the blooms from the pain of the past. "Just wait until they see what I have planned for the debutante season," she replied, patting her 6-month bump. "This little one's given me all sorts of creative inspiration." Her phone buzzed with a message from her lawyer in Miami. The divorce proceedings were finally complete, though Raphael's lawyers had fought viciously to protect his assets. In the end, her own careful documentation of her business dealings had saved her. She'd walked away with her company, a decent settlement, and most importantly, her dignity intact. Another message followed, this one from Maria, her former assistant who'd become her eyes and ears in Miami's social circles. "Victoria's already redecorating the entire house. Threw out all your gardens, but guess what? Their wedding flowers wilted before the reception. Even nature knows a fraud when it sees one." Arlette chuckled, sending back a simple heart emoji. She'd long since stopped feeling the sharp pain those updates used to bring. Now they were just stories from a past life, one that seemed more distant with each passing day. The bell above the shop door chimed as her first appointment arrived. Charlotte Dubois, one of New Orleans' most influential socialites. She'd been skeptical when Arlette first opened shop, but one wedding arrangement had converted her into a devoted client. "Darling," Charlotte breezed in, air-kissing Arlette's cheeks. "You look absolutely radiant. Now, about the governor's ball next month. I need something spectacular. Show me what magic you've dreamed up." As Arlette led her to the consultation area, she caught a glimpse of herself in the vintage mirror hanging on the brick wall. Her reflection showed a woman transformed, still elegant as she'd been in Miami, but softer somehow, more genuine. Her designer clothes had been replaced by flowing dresses that celebrated her pregnancy rather than trying to hide it. The haunted look that had shadowed her eyes in the last years of her marriage had vanished, replaced by a quiet confidence. The morning passed in a blur of clients, each one reinforcing what she'd begun to suspect. New Orleans' old money was just as green as Miami's new wealth, but it came with a depth of culture that resonated with her soul. These clients didn't just want pretty flowers. They wanted stories, traditions, meanings woven into every arrangement. Around noon, Grandma Rose appeared with lunch from her restaurant, gumbo made from their family's secret recipe. "Can't have my great-grandbaby surviving on those fancy salads you used to eat in Miami," she declared, setting up their meal in the shop's back office. As they ate, Arlette shared her latest ultrasound photos. "It's a boy," she said softly, touching the curved shape of her son in the grainy image. "Perfect and healthy in every way." Rose's eyes misted over. "He's going to be strong like his mama," she said firmly, "and loved, so loved." The afternoon brought a surprise visitor, James Rothschild, her former banker from Miami, now relocated to New Orleans' financial district. He'd helped her transfer her accounts and investments before Raphael could freeze everything. An act of kindness she'd never forgotten. "The New Orleans business community is buzzing about you," he said, admiring a particularly stunning arrangement of native Louisiana blooms. "Your reputation for innovation in luxury florals preceded you, but what you're doing here, blending Miami's modern aesthetic with New Orleans' traditional elements, it's creating something entirely new." Arlette smiled, remembering how she'd once thought losing Miami's social connections would end her career. Instead, it had freed her to evolve, to create without constraints. Her New Orleans clients appreciated the way she wove local flowers and traditions into contemporary designs, creating arrangements that honored both past and present. As the day wound down, she sat in her office reviewing the books. The business was thriving beyond her expectations. She'd even had to hire 2 assistants to help manage the growing demand. Next week, she had meetings with 3 of New Orleans' top wedding planners, all eager to establish exclusive partnerships. Her hand rested on her growing belly as she felt her son kick. "We're going to be just fine, little one," she whispered. "Better than fine." The setting sun painted the French Quarter in shades of gold and rose, filtering through the shop's historic windows and making the flowers glow. Arlette moved through the space, misting her blooms one last time before closing. Each arrangement represented not just artistic vision, but resilience, rebirth, the ability to create beauty from pain. Outside, a jazz band had set up on the corner, their music floating through the evening air. A group of tourists stopped to admire her window display, phones out to capture the stunning designs. This was home now, not the artificial perfection of Miami's social scene, but the authentic, soulful heart of New Orleans. That evening, sitting on Grandma Rose's porch with a glass of fresh mint tea, Arlette felt complete peace for the first time since leaving Miami. The traditional Garden District home, with its wraparound porch and abundant gardens, had become more than just a refuge. It was the foundation for her new life. "I've been thinking about names for the baby," she said, watching fireflies dance in the gathering dusk. "What do you think about Marcus?" "It means warrior." Rose smiled, reaching over to pat her hand. "Marcus Flower." She tested the name. "A strong name for a strong boy. Your daddy would have loved it." As night settled over New Orleans, Arlette felt her son move within her, strong and sure. Unlike her previous life, built on the shifting sands of others' expectations, this new chapter was founded on solid ground, family, authenticity, and the unstoppable power of a mother's love. She was no longer the broken woman who'd fled Miami in the rain. She was Arlette Flower, successful business owner, mother-to-be, survivor. And her story was just beginning. Chapter 6. When Past Meets Present. 5 years could change everything, Arlette mused as she adjusted Marcus's bow tie in the gleaming bathroom of New York's Plaza Hotel. The Metropolitan Museum of Art's annual gala had specifically requested Fleur de Vie to handle their floral arrangements, a testament to how far she'd come from that rainy night in Miami. "Mama, is it much longer?" Marcus asked, fidgeting with the tiny tuxedo she'd had custom-made for him. At 4.5, he was already showing signs of the man he'd become, tall for his age, with her warm brown skin and Raphael's striking green eyes. Those eyes were currently full of childish impatience, making her heart squeeze with love. "Just a few more minutes, my little warrior," she smiled, smoothing his dark curls. "Mama needs to make sure all the flowers are perfect for the party. Then we can explore the dinosaur museum tomorrow, just like I promised." Her son's face lit up at the mention of dinosaurs, his current obsession. He'd inherited her love of beauty and Raphael's fascination with science, though he'd never know about that second part. As far as Marcus knew, his father was an angel in heaven, a story that seemed kinder than the truth. The gala's theme was Renaissance in Bloom, and Arlette had transformed the museum's grand entrance hall into a living recreation of Botticelli's Primavera. Her team had worked for 3 days straight, weaving thousands of flowers into elaborate arrangements that seemed to defy gravity. Mrs. Flower, her assistant Sophie, appeared in the doorway. "The first guests are arriving, and Mrs. Astor is asking for you specifically. Something about the centerpieces in the Egyptian wing." Arlette straightened, checking her reflection one last time. The emerald green gown she wore was a far cry from the conservative clothes she'd favored in Miami. Motherhood and success had given her a confidence that radiated from within, making her more beautiful at 37 than she'd been at 28. "Come on, little man." She held out her hand to Marcus. "Let's go make some magic." They walked through the transformed museum halls, Marcus's eyes wide with wonder at the flower-draped statues and illuminated arrangements. New York's elite were beginning to arrive, their excited murmurs echoing off the marble walls as they discovered each new floral installation. "Arlette, darling," Patricia Astor descended upon them, resplendent in vintage Dior. "The flowers are simply transcendent. And who is this handsome young gentleman?" "This is my son, Marcus," Arlette said proudly. "Marcus, can you say hello to Mrs. Astor?" "Hello," Marcus said politely, executing the small bow Grandma Rose had taught him. "Your necklace looks like the stars." Patricia laughed in delight. "Oh, he's absolutely precious, and those eyes, extraordinary." A shadow crossed Arlette's face at the mention of Marcus's eyes, but she maintained her professional smile. "Thank you. Now, I heard there was a concern about the Egyptian wing." As they discussed the centerpieces, Arlette felt a shift in the air, the kind of change in atmospheric pressure that precedes a storm. She turned instinctively, her body remembering a danger her mind hadn't yet processed. And there he was. Raphael Kendrick stood frozen at the entrance to the Egyptian wing, his face pale as if he'd seen a ghost. He looked older, grey, threading his dark hair, new lines etched around his mouth. The blonde woman beside him, Victoria, Arlette's mind supplied unnecessarily, was speaking rapidly, but he didn't seem to hear her. His eyes were fixed on Marcus. Time seemed to stop, the Grand Museum Hall falling away until there was nothing but this moment, this recognition. Arlette saw the exact second Raphael understood, watched the truth hit him like a physical blow. Those distinctive green eyes, his eyes, staring back at him from the face of a child who could only be his son. "Mama?" Marcus tugged at her hand, confused by her sudden tension. "Can we see the mummies now?" His voice broke the spell. Arlette pulled him close, maternal instinct overriding everything else. "In a minute, sweetheart. Mama needs to handle something first." She turned to Sophie, who had materialized at her elbow. "Take Marcus to see the butterfly installation, please. I'll join you shortly." Sophie, bless her, didn't ask questions. She'd been with Arlette long enough to read the situation. "Come on, Marcus. Wait until you see the butterflies we made from orchid petals." Arlette watched them disappear around a corner before finally facing her past. Raphael had moved closer, ignoring Victoria's attempts to hold him back. He looked shell-shocked, his usual polish cracked to reveal the turmoil beneath. "Is he—" His voice cracked. "How old?" 4.5, Arlette replied, her tone arctic. "Not that it's any of your concern." 4.5, he repeated numbly. "That means, that night, you were pregnant." "Yes, I tried to tell you, if you recall, but you were too busy introducing your new wife to listen." Victoria's face had turned an interesting shade of puce. "This is ridiculous. You can't possibly expect us to believe—" "I don't expect anything from you." Arlette cut her off, her voice deadly quiet. "Neither does my son. We've done quite well without the Kendrick name or money, thank you." Raphael stepped forward, his eyes desperate. "Arlette, please. If I had known, you would have what? The years of hurt crystallized into cold fury. Waited to betray me until after the baby was born. Made different arrangements for your convenient replacement wife. Tell me, Raphael, what would you have done differently? He flinched as if she'd slapped him. Around them, the gala continued. New York's elite sipping champagne and admiring flowers, oblivious to the drama unfolding in their midst. He's beautiful, Raphael whispered. He looks like me, Arlette interrupted firmly. He has my heart, my strength, my resilience. The eyes, they're just genetics, nothing more. Victoria grabbed Raphael's arm. Darling, we should go. This is obviously some kind of setup. But Raphael shook her off, his face haunted. All these years, why didn't you tell me? Arlette laughed, a sound entirely without humor. Tell you? You had me served with divorce papers before I could even process what was happening. You froze our accounts, spread rumors about my character, and moved your mistress into our home before my side of the bed was cold. When exactly should I have told you? She stepped closer, her voice dropping so only he could hear. But you want to know the real reason. I looked at the man I loved, the father of my child, as he destroyed everything we'd built together. And I decided my son deserved better than a father who could do that to his mother. The truth hit him like a physical blow. He staggered slightly, reaching for a nearby column to steady himself. Arlette, I was wrong. So terribly wrong. If you'd just... Let me explain. Mr. Kendrick. A museum curator appeared, tablet in hand. We need you in the modern wing for the tech presentation. Arlette stepped back, smoothing her gown. If you'll excuse me, I need to check on my son. We have plans to see the dinosaurs tomorrow. He's quite the scientist, you see, though I suppose you'll never know that about him. She turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Raphael? The next time you're in Miami, look at what's become of the gardens you let Victoria destroy. Sometimes the things we carelessly throw away bloom more beautifully in better soil. With that, she walked away, her heels clicking against the marble floor, her spine straight and strong. Behind her, she heard Victoria's shrill demands for explanations, but she didn't look back. Her son was waiting, and he was the only Kendrick who mattered now. Chapter 7. Truth and Consequences. The morning after the Met Gala dawned crisp and clear over Central Park. Arlette sat at the window of their Plaza Hotel suite, watching the sunrise paint the city gold, while Marcus slept peacefully in the adjoining room. She hadn't slept at all, her mind replaying every moment of last night's encounter with Raphael. Her phone had been buzzing incessantly since the event. News travelled fast in elite circles, and the dramatic reunion of Raphael Kendrick with his ex-wife and discovery of his unknown son was too juicy a story to ignore. She'd turned off her phone after the third call from a Miami Society columnist. A soft knock at the door broke through her reverie. Standing outside was Sophie, holding coffee and the morning papers. I thought you might need these, she said softly, setting them down. And you should know, it's already hit the Society pages. Arlette picked up the New York Times style section. There it was, a photo of her and Marcus at the gala, alongside an older picture from her Miami days with Raphael. The headline read, Floral Empire Founder's Secret, Tech Mogul's Hidden Heir Blooms in New Orleans. Mama? Marcus's sleepy voice came from the bedroom. Can we go see the dinosaurs now? Pushing aside the papers, Arlette forced a bright smile. Of course, my love. Let's get you dressed for our big adventure. As she helped Marcus with his bow tie, he insisted on wearing one just like last night. Her phone lit up with a text from Grandma Rose. Just saw the news. You need me on the next flight to New York. Before she could reply, another message appeared. This one from James Rothschild. Raphael's lawyers are already making inquiries. Call me when you can. The American Museum of Natural History proved to be a perfect distraction. Marcus's excitement over the dinosaur exhibits pushed aside all thoughts of last night's drama. His scientific mind, so like his father's, delighted in every detail, asking questions that impressed even the museum guides. "Mama, did you know T-Rex had feathers?" he exclaimed, bouncing with enthusiasm. "Just like birds. Can we put feathers in our next flower arrangement?" Arlette laughed, grateful for her son's innocent joy. "That's actually a brilliant idea, sweetheart. We could call it Prehistoric Garden." As they explored the Hall of Ocean Life, Arlette's phone buzzed again. This time, it was a number she hadn't seen in 5 years. Raphael's mother, Constance. "I suppose we need to talk," the familiar cold voice said when she answered. "The Kendrick name comes with certain obligations." "The only obligation I have is to my son's happiness," Arlette replied firmly. "And last I checked, the Kendrick name wasn't interested in him, or his mother." "Don't be difficult, Arlette. Raphael has rights." "Rights?" Arlette's laugh was bitter. "The right to abandon us? The right to destroy our family? The right to—" "Mama, look! A blue whale!" Marcus's excited call interrupted her tirade. She looked at her son, his green eyes shining with wonder as he stared up at the massive model suspended from the ceiling. "I have to go," she told Constance. "My son needs me. You remember what that's like, don't you? Actually putting your child first." She hung up before Constance could respond, turning her full attention back to Marcus's excitement about marine mammals. That evening, as they shared room service dinner in their suite, a familiar face appeared on the business news, playing in the background. Raphael was giving a press conference, looking haggard and years older than he had last night. "Personal matters should remain private," he was saying. "I ask for respect for all parties involved during this sensitive time." Marcus looked up from his chocolate cake. "Mama, that man has eyes like mine." Arlette's heart stopped for a moment. Of course he would notice. He was too intelligent not to. "Yes, sweetie, sometimes people can share features without being related. Remember how your friend Emma has the same color hair as Sophie?" But Marcus was frowning, thoughtfully. He was staring at us at the flower party, and he looked sad. Before Arlette could respond, her phone lit up with another text, this one from Maria in Miami. "Victoria just stormed out of the mansion with 3 suitcases. Word is she's filing for divorce. Karma's blooming, boss." The next morning brought a letter from Raphael's lawyers, hand-delivered to their hotel suite. It was carefully worded, speaking of parental rights, DNA tests, and financial support. Attached was a personal note from Raphael. "Arlette, I know I have no right to ask anything of you, but please, don't punish Marcus for my mistakes. He deserves to know his father. I'll accept whatever terms you set." Ah. She showed the letters to James Rothschild over lunch at the Palm Court. "He can't force a relationship," James assured her. "But if this goes to court, well, New York judges tend to favor fathers' rights." "He's thrived for 5 years without a father," Arlette said firmly. "He has all the family he needs in New Orleans." But that night, watching Marcus sleep, she found herself wondering, did she have the right to keep him from knowing his father? Was she protecting him or punishing Raphael? Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I've loved him since the moment I saw him last night. Please don't let my sins deny him a father. Raphael." Arlette stood at the window, looking out over the twinkling lights of Manhattan. In the reflection, she could see Marcus sleeping peacefully, clutching the stuffed T-Rex they'd bought at the museum. His face held traces of both his parents, her determination, Raphael's curiosity. Perhaps it was time to let go of the past, not for Raphael's sake, but for Marcus. He deserved to know where he came from even if that truth was complicated. She picked up her phone and typed a response. Tomorrow, Central Park Zoo, 10 a.m. If you're serious about being in his life, prove it. But understand this, one wrong move, one hint of the man you were in Miami, and you'll never see him again. The response came immediately. I'll be there. Thank you. Setting down her phone, Arlette whispered a prayer to whoever might be listening. Tomorrow would change everything. Again. But this time she was stronger. This time she held the power. And this time every decision would be made with one goal only, her son's happiness. The New York night sparkled with possibility as she finally drifted off to sleep, tomorrow's meeting looming like a storm cloud on the horizon. Chapter 8. The Sweetest Revenge. The autumn sun cast long shadows across Central Park as Arlette watched Raphael interact with Marcus near the sea lion pool. 3 months had passed since their first supervised visit, and each encounter revealed more of the painful irony fate had crafted. The man who had once cruelly dismissed her as barren now hung on every word of the child he'd never known existed. Did you know sea lions can sleep underwater, Dad? Marcus's voice carried across the distance, the word Dad still new and experimental on his tongue. Arlette's heart clenched at how naturally it came to him, how eagerly he embraced this new presence in his life. Her phone buzzed with another urgent message from her lawyer. Kendrick Technologies' stock had plummeted another 15% today. The company was bleeding investors, and rumors of a hostile takeover were growing louder. She allowed herself a small smile. Revenge, it seemed, came in many forms. The past 3 months had transformed the landscape of their lives. After careful negotiation and extensive legal documentation, she'd agreed to let Raphael begin building a relationship with Marcus. But it came with strict conditions. All visits would be supervised, no overnight stays, and absolutely no interference with their life in New Orleans. Victoria had filed for divorce within weeks of the Met Gala revelation, leading to a very public scandal that damaged both Raphael's personal reputation and his company's stability. The woman who had once smirked at Arlette from the top of her Miami stairs was now splashed across tabloids, caught in compromising positions with a young tennis instructor. Mrs. Flower? Her assistant's voice broke through her thoughts. The Bloomberg reporter is on the line again. They want to confirm the rumors about Fleur de Vis's potential acquisition of Kendrick Technologies' Miami properties. Tell them all questions will be answered at tomorrow's press conference, Arlette replied, her eyes still on Marcus and Raphael. The company she'd built from the ashes of her marriage had flourished beyond anyone's expectations. Fleur de Vis had expanded beyond flowers into a full luxury lifestyle brand, with boutiques in every major city and a client list that read like a who's who of global elite. When Kendrick Technologies began to falter, she'd seen an opportunity. Years of careful business, decisions and strategic partnerships had given her the resources to make a move she'd never dreamed possible back in Miami. Now, she was poised to acquire the very company that Raphael had once used to control her. "Mama, look!" Marcus called out, waving excitedly. "The sea lions are doing tricks!" She walked over to join them, noting how Raphael tensed slightly at her approach. The once proud tech mogul looked tired, the strain of recent months evident in the new lines around his eyes. His custom suits couldn't hide the weight he'd lost, nor could his expensive watches distract from the slight tremor in his hands. "Having fun, sweetheart?" she asked Marcus, smoothing his curls. "Dad says we can visit the Penguin House next." His green eyes sparkled with excitement. "Did you know penguins mate for life?" The innocent comment landed like a punch to the gut for both adults. Raphael flinched visibly, while Arlette maintained her serene smile. "That's fascinating, honey. Why don't you go read the information panel while I talk to your father for a moment?" Once Marcus was out of earshot, Raphael spoke first. I suppose you're enjoying this." "Enjoying what?" Arlette's voice was honey-sweet. "Watching our son learn about faithful animals? Or watching your empire crumble?" "You know what I mean. The takeover bid, the press speculation, the way you've positioned yourself to buy everything I built." "Everything we built," she corrected him. "Or did you forget who helped you navigate Miami's social circles? Who hosted the dinner parties that secured your biggest investors? Who stood by you for 10 years while you built your precious legacy?" He had the grace to look ashamed. "I know I hurt you." "Hurt me?" She laughed softly. "You destroyed me, or at least you tried to. But here's the beautiful thing about destruction, Raphael. Sometimes what grows back is stronger than what was there before." Her phone buzzed again. Another news alert about Kendrick Technologies' falling stock prices. Tomorrow's announcement would seal Raphael's fate. Her team had already prepared the paperwork for a complete takeover, one that would give her controlling interest in the company he'd built. "What are you going to do?" he asked quietly. "Once you have control." Arlette watched Marcus pressing his face against the glass of the sea lion pool, his delight pure and untainted by the adult complications swirling around him. "I'm going to do what you never could. Build something that will last, something worthy of our son's inheritance." "Our son," he repeated, the words still strange on his tongue. "I miss so much time with him." "Yes," she agreed. "Your choices have consequences, but you know what the difference is between us? I'm not going to use our child as a weapon. You'll continue to have supervised visits, continue building a relationship with him, because that's what's best for Marcus." She turned to face him fully. "But make no mistake, the company, the Miami properties, the social standing you valued above our marriage, those are mine now. Consider it 5 years of back payment for single motherhood." "Mama, Dad, the penguins are getting fed now," Marcus called out, breaking the tension between them. As they followed their son to the penguin exhibit, Arlette reflected on how revenge had transformed from her original bitter fantasies. She'd once dreamed of destroying Raphael completely, of making him feel as broken as she had that rainy night in Miami. But success, motherhood and time had taught her a better way. True revenge wasn't about destruction. It was about rising so high that your former oppressor became irrelevant. It was about turning pain into power, betrayal into business acumen, heartbreak into an empire. Tomorrow, when she announced Fleur de Vie's acquisition of Kendrick Technologies, she wouldn't be gloating. She would be gracious, professional, focused on the future rather than the past. And that, perhaps, was the sweetest revenge of all, knowing that she had become everything he thought she couldn't be, while he had lost everything he thought he couldn't lose. "Look, Mama!" Marcus pointed excitedly at a penguin pair. "They're holding flippers." "Yes, they are," she smiled, catching Raphael's pained expression in her peripheral vision. "Some bonds last forever, and others, well, others teach us what we're really made of." The autumn sun continued its arc across the New York sky, casting new shadows and highlighting new possibilities. Tomorrow would bring changes, power shifts, and media speculation. But today, watching her son's joy and her ex-husband's quiet resignation, Arlette knew she had already won the only victory that truly mattered, the freedom to write her own story, on her own terms. The sweetest revenge, after all, was living well. Chapter 9. The Path to Peace. The New Orleans spring filled the Garden District with the scent of jasmine and possibility. Arlette sat on her grandmother's porch, watching Marcus show Raphael around their flourishing garden. It had been a year since the Met Gala revelation, and time had softened some of the sharper edges of their complicated relationship. "See these?" Marcus pointed to a cluster of orchids. "Mama says they're like people, each one unique and special, and these are my responsibility. I water them every morning before school." Raphael knelt beside their son, examining the flowers with genuine interest. He looked different now, humbled, but somehow more authentic than he'd ever been in Miami. The loss of his company had stripped away the corporate armor he'd worn for so long, revealing a man who was finally learning what truly mattered. "You know," Rose commented from her rocking chair, "watching them together, you can see how blood calls to blood." The old woman had surprised everyone by being the first to advocate for Raphael's presence in Marcus's life, despite her initial fury at his past actions. Arlette nodded, remembering the past year's journey. After acquiring Kendrick Technologies, she'd surprised the business world by retaining Raphael as a consultant, not out of sentiment, but because his technical expertise was valuable, and because it gave him a way to contribute to their son's future without compromising her control. The transition hadn't been easy. Victoria's messy divorce and subsequent tell-all book had created a media circus. Miami's social circles had buzzed with speculation and scandal, but through it all, Arlette had maintained her dignity and focus on what mattered most, Marcus's well-being. "Mama!" Marcus called out excitedly. "Can Dad stay for dinner? I want to show him my science project." Arlette caught Raphael's hopeful glance. These casual family moments were still new territory for all of them. "Of course, sweetheart, if your father doesn't have other plans." "No plans," Raphael said quietly. "Nothing more important than this." As Marcus dragged his father off to see his latest experiment, something involving growing crystals, Arlette reflected on how their dynamics had evolved. The bitter anger that had fueled her initial revenge had gradually transformed into something more complex. Not forgiveness exactly, but understanding. Her phone buzzed with a message from James Rothschild. "Merger paperwork is finalized. Kendrick Technologies is officially part of Fleur de Vie's portfolio. Congratulations, CEO." The irony wasn't lost on her. She had succeeded beyond her wildest dreams, building an empire that dwarfed what Raphael had lost. But success had taught her that power wasn't about dominance. It was about creation, growth, and legacy. Later that evening, as they sat around Rose's dining table, the conversation flowed more naturally than it had in months. Marcus chattered excitedly about his upcoming science fair, while Rose shared stories about Arlette's childhood that made them all laugh. "Remember when you first started arranging flowers?" Rose asked, passing the gumbo. "You were so determined to make everything perfect, just like now." "Some things never change," Raphael commented softly. "Your attention to detail was always remarkable." The moment could have been awkward, but time had dulled the sting of old memories. Instead, Arlette found herself sharing a knowing look with her ex-husband. They had both changed, grown, learned from their mistakes. After dinner, while Marcus showed Raphael his crystal collection upstairs, Rose pulled Arlette aside. "You're doing the right thing, child. That man may have broken your heart, but he's trying to mend his ways, and Marcus deserves to know his father." "I know," Arlette sighed. "It's just, sometimes when I see them together, I remember everything we lost." "No, baby," Rose corrected gently. "You remember everything you gained. Look at you now, successful, strong, raising a beautiful son. Sometimes things have to break apart so they can be rebuilt better." The evening wound down with Marcus falling asleep on the porch swing, his head resting against Raphael's shoulder. The sight stirred something in Arlette's heart. Not regret, but acceptance of how life's path had twisted and turned. "He has your mind," she told Raphael as he carefully carried their sleeping son to bed. "That curiosity, that need to understand how things work." "But he has your heart," Raphael replied. "Your strength, your resilience. He's the best of both of us. Everything I almost lost the chance to know." After tucking Marcus in, they stood on the porch, the New Orleans night wrapping around them like a familiar embrace. The distance between them was no longer charged with anger or revenge, but with the quiet acknowledgement of their shared past and separate futures. "Thank you," Raphael said suddenly, "not just for letting me be part of his life, but for showing me what real success looks like. You've built something remarkable, Arlette." She studied him in the soft porch light, seeing both the man who had broken her heart and the father who was trying to heal their son's world. We all build what we can from what life gives us. Sometimes the strongest foundations are built on broken ground. As Raphael prepared to leave, Marcus's voice drifted down from his bedroom window. "Good night, Mama." "Good night, Dad. Love you both." Those simple words hung in the jasmine-scented air, a reminder that love, even complicated love, had a power all its own. Arlette watched Raphael's car disappear down the street, then turned to look at her beautiful home, her thriving business, her precious son. She had everything she'd ever wanted, just not in the way she'd originally planned. And perhaps that was the greatest lesson of all, that sometimes life's detours led to better destinations than the paths we'd carefully mapped out. The New Orleans night sparkled with fireflies, nature's reminder that even in darkness, light finds a way to shine. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new triumphs, new opportunities for growth. But tonight, in this moment, peace had finally bloomed in the garden of her heart. Chapter 10. Blooming anew. 5 years had passed since the fateful Met Gala reunion. The Miami skyline glittered in the distance as Arlette stood in the garden of her old mansion, now the headquarters of Fleur de Vie International. Where Victoria had once destroyed her beloved flower beds, a spectacular botanical paradise had risen, more beautiful than before. Marcus, now 10, raced through the winding paths with his father, their laughter echoing across the grounds. "Mom, look what Dad and I found." He held up a single white orchid that had somehow survived all these years, hidden beneath the shade of a banyan tree. "Life finds a way," Raphael said softly, meeting her eyes across the garden. The years had been kind to him, the hardness of the corporate warrior replaced by something gentler. Running the tech division of Fleur de Vie suited him better than being CEO ever had. Today was special, the 10th anniversary of Fleur de Vie's transformation from a local New Orleans flower shop to an international luxury empire. The garden was set up for a gala celebration, white chairs arranged beneath flowering trellises, crystal chandeliers suspended from ancient oak trees. "Everything's perfect," Sophie announced, checking items off her tablet. "The governor just arrived, and Mrs. Astor's plane landed 20 minutes ago." Arlette nodded, adjusting a spray of roses. The guest list read like a who's who of international society, but this time she was the one wielding the power. The company she'd built from heartbreak had revolutionized the luxury industry, combining traditional elegance with sustainable innovation. "Grandma Rose is here!" Marcus shouted, running to embrace his great-grandmother. At 85, Rose was still a force of nature, arriving in a flowing caftan and her signature turban. "Well, well," Rose said, looking around the transformed garden. "Seems like everything's come full circle, hasn't it?" Indeed it had. The Miami society that had once whispered behind Arlette's back now clamored for her attention. Victoria had moved to Europe after her tell-all book failed to generate the scandal she'd hoped for. And Constance Kendrick, humbled by time and circumstance, had finally accepted that her grandson's happiness mattered more than social status. As evening approached, guests began to arrive. The garden glowed with thousands of tiny lights, creating a magical atmosphere that made even the most jaded socialites gasp in wonder. Marcus, handsome in his tuxedo, played perfect host alongside both his parents. "He's remarkable," Raphael commented, watching their son charm Patricia Astor with his knowledge of rare orchids. "You did an amazing job raising him." "We both contributed," Arlette replied diplomatically. Their relationship had evolved into something neither of them could have imagined 5 years ago, not romance, but a genuine friendship built on mutual respect and shared love for their child. The celebration was in full swing when Marcus clinked his glass for attention. He'd begged to give a speech, and now he stood before Miami's elite with the poise of a born leader. 10 years ago, my mum taught me that flowers can grow anywhere, even in difficult places, he began. She showed me that beauty can come from pain, and that the strongest gardens are the ones that survive storms. Today, we're celebrating not just a successful company, but a lesson in resilience. Tears glistened in Arlette's eyes as their son continued, his green eyes, so like his father's, sparkling with emotion. I'm lucky because I have two parents who showed me different kinds of strength. My mom built an empire from scratch, and my dad learned that it's never too late to grow into a better person. The crowd applauded warmly, many wiping away tears. Raphael squeezed Arlette's hand briefly, a gesture of gratitude, understanding, shared pride in the remarkable young man they'd raised. Later, as music filled the garden and guests danced under the stars, Arlette found a quiet moment to herself near the old banyan tree. The white orchid Marcus had found seemed to glow in the moonlight, a survivor like herself. "Penny for your thoughts." Rose appeared beside her, offering a glass of champagne. "Just thinking about how life surprises us," Arlette smiled. 10 years ago, I thought my world was ending. Instead, it was just beginning. "That's the thing about gardens," Rose said wisely. "Sometimes the most beautiful blooms come after the hardest pruning." The evening wound down gradually, guests reluctant to leave the enchanted atmosphere. Marcus had fallen asleep in one of the garden swings, peaceful and innocent despite the complexity of the adult world around him. "I'll carry him up," Raphael offered. Though he now lived in a penthouse downtown, he still had rooms in the mansion for nights when Marcus stayed with him. Arlette watched them go, remembering another night long ago when she'd fled this same house in tears. Now she owned it, had transformed it, had turned it into something that represented growth rather than loss. The last guest departed around midnight, leaving Arlette alone in her garden. The Miami moon painted everything silver, creating shadows and light that danced among the flowers. She sat on a bench beneath the banyan tree, surrounded by the empire she'd built from broken dreams. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, a possible expansion into Asia, Marcus's upcoming school transition, the endless demands of running a global company. But tonight, in this peaceful moment, she could appreciate how far she'd come. The white orchid caught her eye again, resilient and beautiful despite everything it had endured. Like her, it had survived being discarded, had found a way to bloom in unexpected places. She touched its petals gently, feeling the strength in their delicate beauty. "Mom," Marcus's sleepy voice called from above, "come tell me a story?" She smiled, rising from the bench. This was her real success. Not the company, not the social status, not even the sweet taste of redemption. Her true triumph was the love that had survived and grown stronger, the family they'd created from life's broken pieces. As she climbed the stairs to her son's room, the garden glowed beneath the Miami moon, a testament to the power of resilience, the strength of growth, and the endless possibility of beginning again. Some flowers, after all, bloom most beautifully after the darkest storms. To all the queens who weather life's storms, this story is a tribute to every woman who has faced betrayal, heartbreak, or the pain of unfulfilled dreams, especially to those precious souls who find themselves at 45 or beyond, perhaps feeling that time has stolen certain chances. Please know that your story isn't over. It's simply taking a different path than expected. Like Arlette, you possess a strength that may not yet have revealed its full potential. Remember that while some doors may close, others open, leading to possibilities you might never have imagined. Your worth isn't measured by society's expectations, a wedding ring, or the ability to bear children. It's measured by the resilience in your heart, the wisdom in your soul, and the love you bring to the world. To those who have faced betrayal, your broken pieces aren't your ending. They're the raw materials for building something new. Every tear you've shed can water the garden of your future. The person who broke your trust didn't define your worth, they simply revealed their own limitations. To those who yearn for motherhood, your capacity to nurture and love isn't limited to biological children. There are so many ways to mother, through mentoring, through caring for others, through creating beauty in the world. The maternal instinct that burns in your heart can light paths for others who need guidance and love. Remember, your age is not a limitation. It's a collection of experiences that have made you uniquely powerful. Your past heartbreaks aren't failures. They're proof of your courage to love deeply. Your dreams haven't expired. They're simply waiting for the right season to bloom. Your worth isn't diminished by someone else's inability to see it. Like the white orchid in our story that survived against all odds, you too can bloom in unexpected places. Your life may not follow the traditional path you once envisioned, but it can still be filled with purpose, love, and profound beauty. Stand tall, magnificent soul. Your story isn't over. In many ways, it's just beginning. The world needs your wisdom, your strength, and your resilient heart more than ever. You are not defined by what was taken from you, but by how you rise, reinvent yourself, and share your light with others. You are seen, you are valued, you are powerful, and like Arlette discovered, sometimes life's most beautiful chapters begin after we think the story is over. Your crown may be dented, but it still shines. Straighten it, rise up, and walk forward with the dignity of a queen who knows her true worth isn't determined by anyone else's actions or society's expectations. And if this story moved you, don't let it end here. Subscribe now, and let's create the next chapter together.